Do keep an eye out if Caleb Williams is available in your league. I think he's just going to continue to get better. But still, Caleb Williams in ESPN is only 44.7% rostered. So definitely pick him up if he's out there. Also look into Tank Dell because I think that he's a guy that struggled so far this season relative to where he was drafted. But with the Nico Collins injury, we could see an uptick in Dell's numbers.
Diggs back there, they fake to him. Mixon wanting to go out. Here comes White to the end zone. Caught! Dell! Touchdown! 8-play drive. Williams gets out of trouble with his left. Now he keeps it again. He's got a lot of room. Williams inside the 5. It's going to the end zone. There's Kamani. Doing it all. Here in London.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fantasy Football 201. Hope everybody is having a good week 6. Hopefully, you're coming home with a W this week. But we're going to look ahead to week 7 in this video. We're going to talk pickups, drops, buy low, and sell high for each of the positions, just as we've done every week so far this season. And I'm going to give you my top 10 rest of season for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, and tight end to help gauge some of your decision-making process of who you want to target in trades. If you're interested in more content like this, subscribe to my channel, like the video, drop a comment. I reply to all commenters who post a comment, and I have a fan mailbag on Saturdays where I talk about everybody's questions that asks a question about what to do with their roster. I go in depth on that. So if you want to take advantage of that with this small channel, please do. I really appreciate it. Before we get into the positions and what to do, I'm going to do a segment today which is called business decisions. And these are business decisions that you have to make of guys that you just want to get out of this business. These players, based on what we've seen the first 6 weeks, are not encouraging signs for the rest of the season. And in my opinion, I would be trying to do whatever you can to get out of these players, whether that be either trading or dropping them if you cannot get any takers. So I'll start at the quarterback. So the quarterback that I would be trying to get out of the business of is Anthony Richardson. So Anthony Richardson, very talented, as we've talked about before on this channel. I do like him and I have defended him, but we've seen too much of a pattern at this point of just injuries after injuries. And we see quarterbacks throughout the league consistently putting up 20 points. We see really all types of guys have done this. I think I'd have to do the exact numbers of how many have at least surpassed 20 points, but it's at least half the quarterbacks in the league. And Anthony Richardson now, he has not been effective since week 1. He's also dealing with injuries, and the team is playing better without him. So there's so many variables with him. I think that you could get more hypothetically from him at this point than you can in terms of value that can help you rest of season. Yes, this is kind of more specific to if you're in a redraft league as opposed to a dynasty league. If you're a dynasty, I think all you can really do is just hold on and hope that things get better. But as soon as things do, I would recommend trying to sell. And I think in redraft leagues where it's one quarterback, he is droppable at this point. And I will spare the conversation on this on Patrick Mahomes because I've already talked about that a lot, but he would be an honorable mention of this as well, of a guy that you need to make a business decision and move on from him. All right, running back business decisions. These are players that I would move on from at the running back. And my number one running back I would move on from is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams followed up a couple of solid performances with a pretty poor one today. He's always had a lot of hype throughout his career. If you're not familiar with him, he had a knee injury, unfortunately, and he's never really gotten back to the way he looked as a rookie. But today he only had 6 carries for 23 yards. He had the last 2 weeks he had at least 10 carries, so we were hoping that that's a positive trend in the right direction. But this team likes to mix in different running backs. They're going to be behind more often than not and going to be throwing it more. And then they have Audric Estime coming back as well. I think at this point, if you own Javonte Williams, just be thankful that he has put up solid games at least half of the time this season, and you could try to sell managers on that. But I would not be trying to keep him rest of the season. I would try to move on from him. And then another guy that I want to talk about as an honorable mention is Rachaad White. Rachaad White has not looked good this season. And the thing that is discouraging is not only has Bucky Irving looked good, but Sean Tucker, the running back of the week with the #1 performance. Not many people saw that coming. Had an amazing week too. And both of them have looked better than Rachaad White has this season. So I do like this offense, and I hope that things will work out for Rachaad White. But I think that it's more likely that this situation is just going to be murky moving forward. And I think the best thing you can do with him is just try to sell him for what you can. And, maybe you could sell somebody on his ADP that he's very talented, but I think you could get more consistent players that are more guaranteed to get touches consistently to help you throughout the season. All right, wide receivers to make a business decision on. Amari Cooper. So, yeah, this very talented player, and I think everybody who had him last season remembers how he did in the fantasy football playoffs, but you have to put all that behind you and look at what's going on in the present. And in the present, you see a team that is completely plagued by its quarterback play. Really, at this point, the only player that I think is potentially startable on this team is Njoku on the offensive side of the ball. And maybe things will get better with Nick Chubb, but as long as Deshaun Watson is there's just too many variables for me. Amari Cooper today, another disappointing game. He's only had one good game this season. So I think at this point, the best thing you could do is sell him, and there's going to be takers because a lot of people believe he's going to go to a team like the Chiefs and become their immediate #1 target and go off like he has in years past. But I think until that happens, you honestly can get more out of the hypotheticals with him at this point than you can just holding on to him and hoping that things change. So I would be trying to move on, make a business decision to get out of Amari Cooper. And then I'm going to talk a few other receivers as well. Calvin Ridley. So Calvin Ridley, I went to that game. If you did guess, I was not in the London game. I was in the Calvin Ridley, Tennessee Titans and Colts game. And I could tell you this offense is pretty bad. They cannot throw it at least 20 yards down the field without risking an interception. Will Levis, if you didn't watch that game, could have had 4 interceptions. It was pretty bad. And Calvin Ridley, people do not realize this, but he's actually 29. He's an older receiver that has been in this league for a while. He was suspended a couple years back, but another dreadful game today. And very much like Amari Cooper, he's only had one good game this season where he surpassed 20 points. I think that at this point, you should be trying to sell him, but unlike Cooper, you probably can't get as much for Calvin Ridley, so he's honestly droppable. And if I owned Calvin Ridley, I would be dropping him to try to get somebody else. I know you've drafted him in the 6th, 7th round. You invested a lot of capital in him, but at this point, you got to just cut your losses because you cannot risk putting him out there and him putting up 0.9 points like he has on multiple occasions. He's gone under 5 points. It's just not going to help your team. And then another one I would say relatively is Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has also really only had one good game. I think the hope with that offense is significantly better, so you do like the possibility that Ayuk can turn it around. But I think relative to those other players that I talked about, like Cooper and Ridley, you could probably get a little more from Ayuk. Maybe a good decision to do that depending on what the market is. And then tight ends. So the tight ends that I would be making business decisions to move on from are Mark Andrews. So Mark Andrews today had a nice bounce back, so that was encouraging. He was, I believe, 3 for 63. Pulling up 66 and a touchdown. He only had 4 targets today. So, and this is by far his best game. I just want to read off his numbers that he's had throughout the season. The first game, he had 3 points. Everybody freaked out. Then he had 9 points. Everybody bought back in. Then he had 2 straight zeros. Then he had 9 points last week. Then he had 15 points this past week, or today. So you may be thinking, oh, well, he's doing better. He's turning things around. And I would say, no, he's not. Because he only had 4 targets today. He had 5 the previous week. And this is a player that in years past has been getting 10 targets from Lamar Jackson, but now it's split between multiple tight ends. Zay Flowers is the receiving option on this team that he looks to. And if not, they're going to be running the ball down team's throat with Derrick Henry, and then Mark Andrews is going to be blocking and not catching passes. So if you own Mark Andrews, now is your opportunity to trade him, get anything that you can get from him. I would be trying to move him this week if you own Mark Andrews. I do not see a situation where this pattern changes. So take advantage of this while he's coming off of 2 games where he was serviceable. And then the other player, I'll spare this conversation, but Kyle Pitts, because I've talked about him so much on this channel already. This is not a consistent fantasy football player. He only had 2 catches today. Drake London is that offense. Just move on from Kyle Pitts. Get somebody that's getting a lot of targets. So we will be looking at the quarterbacks, and I'll talk buys in a little bit. But first, we're going to go to the quarterbacks that stood out this week, the ones that you want to pick up. Hopefully you have been listening to my advice about picking up Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams, #1 quarterback on the week. It was awesome for those of you that have him. And he's only 50% rostered in ESPN leagues right now. So Caleb Williams, if he's out there, I would go ahead and grab him. He's I'm going to reveal my top 10 in a little bit, but he's right on the fringe of that rest of season. He's a rookie, but this is a guy that they're putting him in a situation now where he's getting comfortable. He's clearly very talented. I would bet on that, especially in a quarterback market right now where there's a lot of guys that are kind of underperforming. I would take a bet on Caleb Williams and stash him on my bench. Great game today. I see a lot of this moving forward with him. And then other guys out there as well. So keep an eye on Jared Goff, who's 46% rostered in ESPN leagues. Jared Goff, the last 2 games, has completely balled out. He had, of course, the perfect game on a Monday night last week where he had 27 points, 18 of 18. Today he was 18 of 25 with 3 touchdowns and 315 yards for 25 points. So he's obviously humming right now. And this is a player that is known for being up and down at times. But if you've got a good streaming matchup, they get Minnesota next week, which has, if they've been vulnerable in anything, it's been the passing game on their defense. Then they get Tennessee. Then they get Green Bay and Houston. Those are solid matchups that I like for him. I think that this is somebody that could be a good streaming candidate from time to time, right on the fringe of that top 15 as well. And then in deeper leagues, the guys that you want to look at are Bo Nix. I talked about him in the last video. You can see more on that. But he looked really rough in the first half, but really turned things around in the second half. Whenever I've watched him, I've just been so impressed with his tenacity. He's a really tough kid, and really lays it all out there. I see that him could just continue to improve and get better throughout his career. Drake Maye had a great game today as well. Actually played a lot better than I was expecting to. And he believe it was a top 10 quarterback. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, number 9, number 10. So yeah, very encouraging stuff from him. If you're in deep leagues, make sure you stash him, because they're gonna, what we saw today is gonna be predictive of things moving forward. This is gonna be a stream-worthy quarterback for you. And then in the deepest of leagues, please stash Jameis Winston. I know that they say Deshaun Watson is still their quarterback, but the way things are going, I really do not know how long this is going to go. So stash Jameis Winston, because there's a very real chance in the next few weeks that he becomes the starting quarterback. All right, drop candidates. So I talked Anthony Richardson a little bit, and that's one that I'm going to talk about in the buy segments. I'll go into that a little bit more there, is Dak Prescott. I don't think that you need to hold him through his bye week. I think he's better to try to trade if you can. But if you're in one quarterback leagues, Dak Prescott has only had 1 game where he's exceeded 20 points. He had a dreadful performance today where he had 3 points. I think there's not much reason for me to continue to hold on to him in one quarterback leagues. In 2 quarterback leagues, the best thing to do is to try to trade him to a Cowboys fan that hopes he can turn things around. And then in deep quarterback leagues, I think it's safe that you could drop these 3 quarterbacks just all together, and that's Will Levis, Aidan O'Connell, and Deshaun Watson. So I had a chance to watch Will Levis personally today, and it was pretty bad. So yeah, this guy had multiple throws that significantly short-armed the receiver. He wasn't throwing into his throw. He was like leaning back and throwing. So he wasn't stepping into it. His mechanics is off. I don't feel like the line is really doing him any favors either on that team. So, but not trying to make excuses or anything for him. It's just not somebody worth rostering in fantasy. I think if you're in a 2-quarterback league, it may be better if you have the choice of like, oh, well, should I put in Will Levis or should I put in, some fringe wide receiver 3 or 4 that I have? I think it would just be better to do that than to put in guys like him, Aidan O'Connell, and Deshaun Watson, which have just continually been putting up stinkers. Deshaun Watson, I'm just going to look at his numbers throughout the season so far because it's been bad. 10 points, 15 points, 16 points, 12, 8, and 8. Yeah, that's about as bad as it gets. That's got to be lower than 25 among quarterback rankings this season. So, yeah, those guys, just send them to the waivers. All right, so I'm going to talk my top 10 quarterbacks rest of the season, and this will kind of guide the conversation for buy and sell candidates. So my top 10 quarterbacks rest of the season are Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, so that's 5. Then you got Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Baker Mayfield, who, yes, I have come around to. I do apologize to Baker and everybody that's had him that I've said to sell. He's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL right now. He looks awesome. Congrats to him for turning his career around. So he's number 8. Kyler Murray is number 9. And then Justin Fields to me is 10 because of the rushing upside. I personally feel that he's going to keep that quarterback job throughout the season. He's a top 10 quarterback for me. His rushing ability just puts him on a different tier. And then the guys on the fringe that I like, Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, Caleb Williams, and Brock Purdy. Those are all guys that are kind of right around that fringe range that could be top 10 quarterbacks from time to time. I will give Mahomes and Dak their credit that they, maybe they have some weeks that they'll be up there, but I do think that those guys are not in this tier. I would rather have either of these quarterbacks than Dak and Mahomes personally. So in terms of the buy candidates and sell candidates, so you look at that list. I try to buy, if I have, let's say, CJ Stroud, who's ranked number 7 on my list, and I also have Baker Mayfield, who's ranked right after that. I would trade Baker Mayfield to get CJ Stroud. I would trade Baker Mayfield to get Jordan Love, for example. But if you have, Kyler Murray versus Baker Mayfield, I would decide to keep Baker, for example. So each person that's higher on the list is who I would trade for to get to the next person, etc. If that makes sense. So the buy candidates among those players that I have rest of season top 10 that have kind of underperformed or not really stood out compared to their peers so far are CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. And Love, based on his injuries, has that's a little bit explained there, but he's been a very solid fantasy quarterback, but he's not generating a lot of buzz. And I think that you could get him for a pretty cheap price that can be great value for you. And then CJ Stroud has played well, but he hasn't put up great numbers so far. But I do see that turning around, and him putting up some very good games as the season progresses. So those are 2 players that I think are top 10 rest of the season that are not there right now, but will get better. And same thing with Brock Purdy as well. He had a great game on Thursday night. I do like him as a buy low candidate in general because he always gets talked down on because of his Mr. Irrelevant taken in the 7th round. But he is an excellent quarterback, and is a great reliable option for you to throw in there in certain streaming matchups. Sell candidates to me, won't really talk about Patrick Mahomes and Dak, but those are obvious ones. Trevor Lawrence would be a one for a 2 QB league I would try to sell. He's coming off of a 21-point performance and a 17-point performance against Chicago. A lot of that was in garbage time. So I think that this would be a good time to try to sell him for somebody that can be a little more consistent for you. And I think that you could actually command a little more value from him than you'd expect. And really just any of these guys that I would have on the list who have been doing well, if, as I've said earlier, if you have a Justin Fields, he had a great game, and you would probably want to keep him in most situations. But if you have the ability to acquire like somebody who had a worse game today, like Kyler Murray, I would trade Fields to get Murray personally. All right, so before we get into the running backs, I'm going to talk buy or buy. We've got the Chicago Bears and the Dallas Cowboys. So the Bears, who do you want to buy or buy? So buy, like they're on their bye week, you want to buy them onto your team while they're not playing, see if somebody doesn't need them, or do you just say bye and drop them to the waivers? Caleb Williams is a buy. I would make sure that you have him rostered. I would not drop him, and I would be trying to get him from somebody who doesn't need him this week or is in a position where they're desperate and they need to get some W's. Caleb Williams, as I've talked about, I project a great rest of season for him. These running backs, DeAndre Swift, I'd be trying to buy. Roschon Johnson, though, I think you're safe to drop him to the waivers. In deep leagues, I'd be trying to hold on to him, but I think that you can get by without needing him for this week while they're on bye. The wide receivers, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. So I would be trying to buy DJ Moore and Keenan Allen on these bye week performances, or on these upcoming bye weeks. Rome Odunze, I think you do have an ability to drop him in some shallow leagues, but he's somebody that I would not be actively trying to drop. And then Cole Kmet, great buy candidate among the tight ends. I think he has a very legitimate argument to be top 10 rest of season. All right. And then for the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott is a buy to me. I do not think that you need to hold him through the bye week. I think that there are a lot of quarterbacks that are playing better than him right now. And I think because of that, and because of just the ability of so many guys that we've been able to stream that have been very successful throughout the season, it wouldn't really hurt your roster to cut him and to find somebody else out there on waivers, especially in one quarterback leagues. In two quarterback leagues, I would be trying to hold on to him, but I think it's a good chance to sell him, as I talked about earlier. What do you do with Rico Dowdle and Zeke Elliott? So Zeke Elliott is an obvious buy. You do not need him on your roster. He is clearly washed and past his prime at this point. Rico Dowdle, I would be trying to buy, though. I do think that he is going to be the lead running back on this team. And yeah, they look really rough, but I do feel that they're going to get things figured out eventually, and things are going to turn around for them. CeeDee Lamb is a buy for me among the wide receivers, but everybody else to me is a buy. Jalen Tolbert can be dropped, in my opinion. Same with Turpin, same with Brandon Cooks, anybody that happens to still be holding on to him. And then at tight end, Jake Ferguson to me is a buy. I would be trying to get Ferguson, and I'll talk about him in a little bit as well among the tight end buys in general, but I do like his target volume, and I think when this offense gets things figured out, he will have a big role in it. All right, so running backs. So this was a very good week for handcuff running backs that got an opportunity to play. So Sean Tucker, the third string running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, had the top performance on the week. Very surprising. And it was actually a last-minute news clip that came out that Rachaad White was not going to play, but he had 14 carries, 136, touchdown. He also had 3 for 56 and a touchdown through the air. Number one running back on the week. And the thing that concerns me about taking him with the top priority is I just don't know what his volume is going to be when Rachaad White is healthy. And I'm still not really sure if he's the better running back compared to Bucky Irving. So because of that, he's not my number one pickup among the running backs. My number one pickup is going to be Kamani Vidal for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that he has the most upside among these guys. Vidal was injured for the start of the season. He's a rookie, but they said that they wanted to get him involved, so he was kind of a sneaky late addition. He only had 4 carries, and he had 2 receptions for 40 yards. But, if they're working him in and he already gets a touchdown, I think this is a very good start for his development on this roster long term. So if you're looking for the highest upside, I would go with Vidal, especially given J.K. Dobbins' history. There's not really a great running back that stands out as a consistent play, because a lot of the guys, as I said, that did well were handcuffs. But Vidal would be number 1 for me. Of course, we'll check if these guys are out there, but Nick Chubb, he may have been dropped in shallow leagues. I think that he would be a great candidate to pick up. He would be number 1 on this list in general if he is out there. Other guys that I like, number 2 would be Issac Guerrendo. If Jordan Mason's AC sprain keeps him out for quite a while, then Guerrendo has an obvious opportunity to have success with the 49ers. And then other guys to keep an eye out as well that I would really like for this upcoming week are Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. He is coming into a situation where Aaron Jones may not play this upcoming week against Detroit. So Chandler, he's probably not been picked up because of the bye week, may have been forgotten about. He's a very sneaky ad that won't cost you a lot of fab. Some other guys I want to shout out as well that had some good weeks this week that are interesting. More so if you have the lead running back and you're trying to pick up the handcuff for them. Tyler Algier had a nice game today for Atlanta. Already talked about Bucky Irving. I'm going to also mention Jaylen Warren as well. He is healthy again, and he had some solid production today. Not anything special necessarily. Najee Harris did have a great game, but Jaylen Warren showed today that he's got some of his spring back, and I think that he's somebody worth rostering if you do have Harris. And the Jacksonville situation is going to be interesting moving forward because Travis Etienne had a very bad game today, hamstring injury. But it was actually D'Ernest Johnson that got more of the work than Bigsby, which is surprising to people. I think this is a good chance to try to sell Tank Bigsby personally. I think if you have ETN, I think you got to ride it out because you're not going to be getting anything close to the value that he is deserving of. And D'Ernest Johnson, I wouldn't really pay too much attention to. And then another situation to monitor as well, Emari Demercado of Arizona. I do like James Conner, and I don't think that Demercado is going to eat into his workload, but this is something just to monitor as the season moves along. Drop candidates. So the obvious one, Zeke, as I talked about, Zamir White losing that backfield. I mentioned him a little bit ago. Trey Sermon, very ineffective today, and Tyler Goodson was actually a lot more effective on the ground in that game. That was another takeaway I took from that. And then Jerome Ford of Cleveland, another victim, much like Amari Cooper, of the whole offense in general, but Ford was injured. Chubb is coming back. I think this is time to cut ties with Jerome Ford. So my top 10 running backs rest of season. So this will guide the buy and sell discussion. I'll talk some guys specifically that I like to buy and sell. But among the list of guys that I like among running backs rest of season. So to me, it's pretty clearly 2 guys at the top, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. These guys have set themselves apart. I know Saquon struggled today, but I do think that he is going to remain as a top 2 running back rest of season. I still really like Breece Hall, and I really like that playoff schedule, like I mentioned. So he is number 3 on my list. 4 is Bijan Robinson. 5 is Kyron Williams. 6 is James Cook. So these 6 are all this is kind of that next sub tier. So I like Barkley and Henry the most. And then after that, tier B, Bijan, Breece, Kyron, and James Cook. Then I put the CMC Mason duo. I just kind of put them together because the timeline is ambiguous, and I think both these players do have a lot of value, but it's hard to say how much value they have until we really know when Christian McCaffrey comes back. But both those players are going to be very successful, whoever is healthy and has the backfield at that moment. Alvin Kamara, I like, but he is not as high of me as, I know he's the number 1 running back right now going into this week, but just the situation with the offense, Derek Carr being out, it scares me a little bit with him. Joe Mixon is number 9, and then Kenneth Walker is 10. And then honorable mention to the Lions running backs. Those guys are great players to have, but I think they're always just going to cap each other's value, but I'd like them both in that 10 to 15 fringe range. That'll both be very consistent value. So the buy candidates. Josh Jacobs is a great buy candidate to me. He has not put up great numbers, but he is on a great offense. And I think that they're going to be in situations where they're going to utilize him more as the season goes along. He's dealt with some injuries. He's, getting integrated into a new offensive system. I think that he's going to be very reliable for this team, especially as we get into winter and you got to play those cold games in Lambeau where it's going to be like 3 inches of snow, etc. Really like Josh Jacobs. Rest of season, he's in that top 15 range for me. Saquon Barkley off this down game this week. I think this is a perfect time to try to buy him. Probably your only chance. Devon Achane. So this is a tricky one because he was excellent the first 2 weeks of the season when Tua was healthy. But since Tua has been out, it's been very miserable. And you would be risking it to take Achane. But I do really like the option of what things could look like with him when Tua is healthy. So I do like him as a buy candidate. Had some down weeks. He's clearly a very explosive player. I think he will be a solid, sneaky target end of season that can help you win some games late that you need. And then some lower names that I like that you can buy as well. James Conner has struggled in recent weeks, but I think that he's still an RB2 rest of season. And then if you're looking at him in that RB3 range, Rico Dowdle coming off of this rough week for the Cowboys, he's going to have control of that backfield moving forward, and I think this is a good chance to try to buy him off a bad game followed by a bye week. He may be dropped too, so keep an eye out for him there. And then I want to shout out Jordan Mason as well as somebody that you can buy because I think he's had a down game and he's got a shoulder injury, so people may be scared of him. But until we know for sure when CMC is coming back, Jordan Mason is locked into that role for the foreseeable future. Sell candidates. Chuba Hubbard is a good sell candidate to me. He is the number 8 running back right now in fantasy. And I think he will, as long as Brooks is not there, Chuba is always going to be somebody that you can plug in and will be very reliable for you. But I just have a lot of concern when Jonathan Brooks comes back, what that will look like. And I would be trying to cash in off some great Chuba Hubbard games with Andy Dalton over the past few weeks and get one of these running backs that I've mentioned on my top 10. Tony Pollard, saved by a touchdown today. Tony Pollard is the top running back on the Titans, but this offense is just limited to me. I think that this would be a good time to try to move on from him off a good game today and get somebody that will be on a better offensive system. And then kind of the same thing with Najee Harris, a great game today. But I do think that this is a great time to try to move on from Najee too, off of his 20-point game today. And then the Tampa Bay running backs are all sell candidates to me, even Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving. And if anything, for those two especially, because I do not see Sean Tucker putting up games like this consistently moving forward. If it is, it would be incredible. But this is a good opportunity to try to sell because all of them have a case to being the lead running back on this team. And I think that it's more likely than not that it's not just going to be 100% given to any one of the three. So find people that are really buying into one of them and see what you can get from them. All right, wide receivers. So a couple interesting wide receiver pickups for this week. But one that I like the most is Demario Douglas for the New England Patriots. This is a guy that I have been talking about in the last couple weeks because of his target share. But because he had Jacoby Brissett, he just wasn't really getting great numbers out of it. But today, he did get a touchdown. He had 9 targets today, 6 for 92, and 1 his first touchdown of the season. He is the number 1 receiver on this Patriots team. And I think now that they have better quarterback play, they're going to be behind. I think that you could see very consistent numbers from Demario Douglas. Think kind of like a B-grade version of Deontay Johnson. So I would really be interested in trying to get him if he's out there on waivers. I think he could be a great flex-worthy player that you could plug in and give you some solid value. So number 1 guy if he's out there. Number 2 would be Josh Downs. He is emerging as the number one receiver on the Colts. Again, the quarterback play is a little bit more of a concern for me with them because Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco have very different styles and tendencies. But he is, as long as Flacco is there, Downs is definitely a startable player. Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. went out today. He's another guy that I've talked about the stash. But Michael Wilson got a touchdown today, and he may be the number one wide receiver if Marvin Harrison is unable to go in week 7. Xavier Legette got a touchdown today. He's a guy that I like because of the need of a second receiver to fill the void in Carolina. It's still clearly Deontay Johnson's team, but Legette is emerging as a number 2 receiver and is a very interesting option to grab in deep leagues. And then Christian Watson coming back from his injury. And now that Wicks is injured, Watson is going to be a deep threat receiver, going to give you some up and down performances, but he is a solid player to look into on this team. That's very potent offense. And then some other guys to keep an eye out. Noah Brown on the Commanders, starting to emerge as a target leader for them. Great offense, chase the targets with guys like that. And Noah Brown has been successful in fantasy before with the Texans. Troy Franklin, touchdown today. Rookie receiver for the Broncos. They need another receiver to step up, and he actually played with Bo Nix in college, so keep an eye out for him in the deepest of leagues. And then see if Jordan Whittington was dropped from the Los Angeles Rams on their bye week, because if Cooper Kupp is not good to go for this next week, Whittington could be another spot start. I'm personally fading guys like Bub Means, Boutte from the New England Patriots, and Gabe Davis. I've talked about Gabe Davis. This guy does this every year where he has a 20-point game and then follows it up with a 0. But the other guys, I need to see a little bit more from them and to really feel comfortable grabbing them, especially with Fab. Drop candidates, Jajuan Jennings. Sadly, I think it's come to the point where if you can't trade him off that 40-point game now, it's probably missed it. Dontayvion Wicks was dropped. He had an injury today. He's droppable now. We're not sure how long he's going to be out with the concussion, and had one good game. If you can trade him, try, but if not, he's droppable. Quentin Johnston, to me, is droppable as well. I think this is clearly Ladd McConkey's receiving core. And then, as I talked about with Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley, if you're in shallow leagues and do you want to continue to play the game of, they put up a 20-point game in week 2 when I had him on the bench. Now I'm going to try to start him this week and hopefully he does it again. Oh, I know I had another bad game. Oh, well, maybe I could try again. Maybe I'll leave him on the bench now. Oh, I went off for 25. Do you want to continue to play that game? Because for me personally, as a fantasy football manager, I don't. I would rather that be somebody else's problem. So if you don't want to deal with that anymore, I would have no problem with dropping either of this too. My top 10 rest of season to guide our buy and sell discussion with the receivers. Number 1 is Jamar Chase. Number 2 is CeeDee Lamb. He's not looked great so far, but Chase and Lamb to me are consistent target getters, and they have the ability to just break things open. The Cowboys offense needs to play better, but they don't really have much else other than CD. And I think that's going to set up success, but not as much as Jamar Chase. He's locked in number 1 wide receiver, in my opinion. Justin Jefferson is 3. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 4. And then Malik Neighbors is 5. And those guys are all kind of around the same range. I do like what I'm seeing from Malik Neighbors, but I would just like to see a better offense. But all 5 of those guys that I've talked about are very clear volume leaders on their offense in terms of the target share. Drake London has emerged, and he's now a top 6 rest of the season for me. Very similar situation, a great offense in Atlanta. And then don't forget about Cooper Kupp. He's a great buy low candidate too. He's number 7 for me rest of season when he gets healthy, which should hopefully be next week. AJ Brown 8. Tyreek Hill I still have as 9. I think Tua will be coming back in week 8, and then he will have a great rest of season. And then Nico Collins when he gets healthy. And then guys on the fringe to me, Jaden Reed and the 2 Tampa Bay receivers. The thing I have both of them a little bit lower personally because they're going to have games where one of them goes off, the other one's a little bit like, mediocre. So that kind of caps their value a little bit. They're kind of like the Detroit Lions running backs in that sense. But that's my top 10 among the receivers. So doing the math, guys that you want to buy low on, Cooper Kupp, as I mentioned, coming off his bye, some people may be impatient and not have wanted to hold on to him. Jayden Reed is the number one receiver on their team. They were blowing the brakes off of Arizona today. Didn't really need to use him, but in more competitive games, I do expect Reed to have a big role. He's a great buy low candidate for somebody that hasn't really gone off aside from week 1, and you might be able to get him at a cheaper price than what his true value is. Also, some guys that have struggled in week 6 relatively to some past performances, and I think are great pickups because they're number one options on their team. Brian Thomas Jr., Jacksonville, he was matched up against Jaylen Johnson today of Chicago, which is a tough matchup. I do think things will get better for him when he gets better matchups for him. He's their number one receiver. George Pickens on the Steelers. I still think he is a buy candidate because he is their number one. There's going to be a game where he goes off, and that's a good player for me to grab. And then Ladd McConkey is another one in the more fringe range of players that I like that you can grab as well. That should be the number one receiver on their team moving forward. Drew a tough matchup today against the Broncos. Sell candidates. So this is a caveat. Chris Godwin he was number one wide receiver this week. I suspect he's probably close to number one. I have to do the exact total of where he ranks after this week, but he's definitely top 5 now. But he is a sell candidate if you can get one of the elite guys on that list that I mentioned on the top 10. So if you're looking at, Chris Godwin or a Drake London, I would go with London personally. And this is because he's always going to have Evans there. And, the nice thing is that Godwin and Evans are the two center points of that offense, and they're going to rely on those two. But I think if you can get a guy that is clearly the 1A on his team, I would do that. And if you could upgrade Godwin to that, then I would personally. Some guys that I would also look to sell that are kind of in that next tier, Stephon Diggs, Darnell Mooney, and Jameson Williams. So those are all guys that are around the top 25. Jameson Williams, touchdown today. He's a great sell candidate because he doesn't get a lot of target volume, but he has had a lot of positive regression of touchdowns so far that I don't suspect will sustain itself. He did have one down game where he only had one catch a couple weeks back, and I think that my fear is that there'll be more of that moving forward with him. Darnell Mooney, great start to the season. I believe he's a top 20 receiver right now. I think if you could sell him for somebody that is a little more higher pedigree, I would personally do that for Darnell Mooney. And Stephon Diggs, kind of the same thing. I think when Nico Collins comes back, I think we could kind of see things shift a little bit more towards Collins and Dell, maybe a little bit less involvement of Stephon Diggs because Dell had some injuries early in the season that kind of limited some of his upside. And then other sell candidates in that next tier, Devonta Smith is he got a touchdown today, but he is clearly number 2 on that team behind AJ Brown. I would be looking to try to. He has some up and down performances historically throughout his career. I'd be trying to sell him off of a good game. Keenan Allen, if you can get some good value out of him, I would off a 2 touchdown game. And then it's Cortland Sutton, kind of the same thing. These are both guys that I like, but if depending on the options that you have, they're good sell candidates to me as well. All right, so we move to tight end. So the tight end pickup for me that's number 1 this week is Cole Kmet. Yes, he is going into his bye, but he is a clear target machine for this team. Caleb Williams and him have great chemistry. I think that Kmet is the top tight end that you can pick up on waivers and even hold him through his bye if able to. And the nice thing about that is you probably don't have to put as much fab down to get him. But yeah, Cole Kmet to me would be number 1 on this list among the tight ends. Evan Ingram may have been dropped because of his injuries, And I did advocate to drop for him, and I admit probably would have been a good idea to hold him because he came back and had 10 targets today, or 10 catches, 10 targets, 10 catches. But still, that's pretty incredible, especially given the tight end landscape. Other guys that you can look out for as well. Noah Fant had a good game today on Thursday from Seattle. He's a good player to keep an eye out on with 6 targets, 6 for 63 this past game. Not crazy about him, but in deep leagues where you're really hurting, he's not bad to consider. Dallas Goedert managers, he went out with a concussion. Keep an eye on Grant Calcaterra. If you're in very deep leagues, Calcaterra came in and had a solid game. He had 4 targets. He had a long catch today, 4 for 67 total in this game, which is solid among tight ends. And then the fringe guys that I like that got some target volume, I talked about Cade Otton. He did okay today at 9.6. And Hunter Henry had 13.3 for the Patriots. Drake May can expand this offense a little bit more. Hopefully that kind of means better things for Hunter Henry moving forward. All right, drop candidates. Isaiah Likely to me is a good drop candidate at this point. I think if you can't trade him, I think he's safe to just drop. Pat Freiermuth, disappointing game today. There's better tight ends out there to me that I would be trying to look at if you can get one of them. And then for those deep leagues, if you're holding on to Luke Musgrave, now we've seen 2 other tight ends do better than Musgrave on this Green Bay offense. So I think this is a good opportunity to let him go. All right, so my top 10 tight ends. So there's 2 that are very clearly at the top for me. It's George Kittle 1, Brock Bowers 2. Those guys are pretty much locked in there, and I think if you have them, you're probably really happy. The next range, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Travis Kelce, and Trey McBride, and round out 3 through 6. And you can kind of debate that in any way that you can. I kind of preferred Laporta 1 personally among that group, then Kincaid because there's a better chance that they have a better offense in general. Then Kelce because he's a little older, but he is going to get a good target share with how that team is looking right now. Then Trey McBride. The next tier that's going from number 7 on down, Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, and David Njoku. And then that next group is Cole Kmet and Zach Ertz. So that kind of rounds out the top 10 with 2 fringe guys there as well. And you know who that doesn't include is Kyle Pitts, who I've talked about multiple times, and he's a good sell candidate. So, yeah, that being said, if any of those guys on that list that I just mentioned are available, I would trade Kyle Pitts for any of them. So, yeah, there you go. Other buy candidates, though, on that list, Dalton Kincaid has not played yet. He's playing tomorrow, but I think he's still a great buy candidate. Jake Ferguson, as I talked about, number 2 option on that team when they get their offense figured out. I think he's a solid buy candidate, too. And then David Njoku is interesting. He did have 7 targets today coming off of injury, which is more than I expected. I really do not like him necessarily right now with the Deshaun Watson situation, but if Amari Cooper does get traded, then he does become the number 1 receiving option on this team, and that could mean even more targets moving forward. So David Njoku is somebody to consider buying that people may be impatient with and wanting to drop based on how the season has gone so far. And with a lot of these tight ends, you really honestly sometimes don't even need to trade for them. For example, in one of my leagues, Kincaid was dropped. And because of that, I picked him up and then going to roll with him for now. And then that way you don't have to worry about trying to trade for somebody. So a lot of these guys that I mentioned, they may keep an eye out for them because they may be dropped in that second wave after waivers clear Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Sell candidates for me, Mark Andrews, as I already talked about, and then Sam Laporta. The thing that's concerning for me is that he only had 1 catch for 52 today. So, and I do like him as the number 3 tight end rest of the season, but this is a situation where let's say that you have Sam Laporta and then you played the waivers well, and then you also have Tucker Kraft. This is a situation where I think you can get more out of Laporta than Kraft. And if you can flip this game that Laporta just had today to somebody who really needs a tight end and get a flex back, that could be a very good move for you. So that's something to consider if you're already in a situation where you have two of these top 10 tight ends that I've mentioned in my list. All right, so we will close things out talking about defense and kicker for this video. For defense, some matchups that I like for this week, and you're going to notice a theme of some teams that are very good matchups in general for defenses. You got the Buffalo Bills playing the Tennessee Titans, and you got the Los Angeles Rams playing the Las Vegas Raiders. So those are obviously like bad quarterback play, a lot of potential for turnovers. And then if you're really courageous, you can go the Washington Commanders against the Carolina Panthers next week against Carolina. And then another thing that's good to do as you get into this later point in the season is look 2 weeks ahead. And Detroit has Tennessee in 2 weeks, and Detroit was the #1 defense this week. So if you've got some space, you want to start streaming defenses ahead because you're 5-0, you're 6-0, 5-1, and in a comfortable position. You could start doing that. Pay attention to Detroit because that matchup in 2 weeks is very juicy. And then we'll close things out talking about kickers as well. So the top 3 kickers on the week, Jake Bates, Chris Boswell, and Austin Seibert. The key point that I want to make is that all 3 of these guys were not drafted in the fantasy football drafts in August. They were taken well behind a lot of these guys that were reached for, and that just illustrates my kicker point that I've been talking about a lot on this channel, is that it's better to find kickers that you can stream instead of drafting them early. So yes, you may have gotten Justin Tucker, and he did have the number 4 performance today, but pay attention to these sneaky kicker candidates that are on waivers. Both of them are still lightly rostered as well and probably available. Good pickups for you to get at the kicker position. All right, so that's all that we've got for this week. Comment below if you want your questions answered in the next fan mailbag, or if you have any questions about waivers, trades, anything. Just bounce ideas off of me. I love to interact with fans and help you guys win a fantasy football championship. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.